Britain in 1975 was a country caught between two different worlds. The old Britain was still visible everywhere. There were traditional pubs, department stores, railway stations, country estates, busy high streets, and long roads connecting towns and villages. But the country was changing. The 1970s brought new technology, changing fashions, economic difficulties, fuel concerns, and a new generation of drivers. British roads were filled with cars from manufacturers that once seemed impossible to challenge. Jaguar, Rover, Triumph, Austin, Morris, Vauxhall, Daimler, and many others. Luxury and executive cars were especially important for businessmen, government officials, professionals, and wealthy families. A large British car could say a lot about its owner. Leather seats, polished wood, chrome details, large engines, and plenty of space. These cars were built to make every journey feel important, but time was not kind to all of them. Some disappeared because production ended, others were replaced by newer models. Some suffered from reliability problems, and many simply became too old to survive everyday use. Today, we're counting down 10 British cars from around 1975 that you almost never see anymore. Some were once common on British roads, some were surprisingly luxurious, and number one was once so familiar that seeing one today feels almost like discovering a piece of another Britain. Let's begin.
Number 10. The Daimler Sovereign. The Daimler Sovereign was one of the most elegant British luxury cars of the 1970s. Built by Daimler and closely related to Jaguar models, it combined traditional British luxury with Jaguar engineering. Its long bonnet, chrome grille, smooth bodywork, and formal appearance gave it an unmistakable presence. Inside, the Sovereign was exactly what buyers expected from an expensive British car. Leather seats, polished wood, deep carpeting, and plenty of room. The car was particularly attractive to buyers who wanted something more refined than an ordinary executive saloon. Daimler also had an impressive reputation. The name had been associated with British royalty and important figures for decades. That gave the Sovereign a sense of prestige. But the world was changing. More buyers were beginning to look toward Mercedes-Benz, BMW, and other international manufacturers. The Daimler Sovereign gradually became less common. Today, finding one in good condition is a very different experience. What was once a familiar sight outside hotels and country houses has become a rare piece of British motoring history.
Number 9. The Rover P5B. The Rover P5B was already an established car by 1975, but that was part of its appeal. It represented an older and more traditional idea of British luxury. The body was upright and formal, the bonnet was long, the windows were large, and the grille gave the car a serious appearance. The P5B was not trying to be fashionable. It was trying to look important, and it succeeded. Government officials, businessmen, and senior executives were among the people who appreciated the car. Inside, there were leather seats, wood trim, carpeting, and a quiet cabin. Under the bonnet was a 3.5-liter V8, giving the conservative-looking Rover more performance than many people expected. The P5B could glide along country roads while carrying its passengers in comfort. But by the mid-1970s, newer cars were beginning to look more modern. The P5B belonged to an older Britain. Eventually, production ended. The cars disappeared from everyday roads. And today, the P5B is remembered mainly by enthusiasts who appreciate its dignified character.
Number 8. The Triumph 2000. When the Triumph 2000 appeared in the 1960s, it represented a modern approach to the British executive car. By 1975, however, it was already becoming an older design. The car had clean lines, a comfortable cabin, and a smooth 6-cylinder engine. It was smaller and more manageable than some of Britain's huge luxury saloons. That made it attractive to professionals who wanted comfort without driving something enormous. Inside, the Triumph offered wood trim, comfortable seats, and a traditional British atmosphere. The suspension also helped give the car a refined ride. It was the kind of vehicle that could handle a long motorway journey without making its occupants feel exhausted. For years, the Triumph 2000 was a familiar sight on British roads, but competition was becoming stronger. Newer executive cars offered more modern styling, improved performance, and better equipment. The Triumph eventually faded away. Today, the sight of one on the road is unusual. For many people, it is a reminder of a time when British manufacturers could build comfortable executive cars that were not simply copies of foreign designs.
Number 7. The Austin Princess. The Austin Princess was one of the more distinctive British luxury cars of the 1970s. It was produced by British Leyland and was designed to sit above many ordinary family cars. The Princess had a large body, a spacious interior, and a smooth ride. It was not a sports car. It was designed around comfort. The styling was also unusual. Its long, formal shape Triumph gave it a serious appearance, while the interior offered plenty of room for passengers. Depending on the version, the car could be fitted with different engines, including 6-cylinder units. For buyers who wanted a large British car without paying Rolls-Royce prices, the Princess offered an interesting alternative. It was comfortable, it was spacious, and it looked expensive. But British Leyland was facing serious problems during this period. Quality issues damaged the reputation of many British cars. The Princess also faced competition from newer and more fashionable models. Over time, they became harder to find. Today, an Austin Princess attracts attention precisely because it is so unusual. A car that once represented respectable British luxury has become a rare survivor.
Number 6. The Vauxhall Victor FE. The Vauxhall Victor FE arrived during a period when British family and executive cars were changing rapidly. Vauxhall had a long history of producing practical cars for British drivers, and the Victor was one of its most recognizable names. The FE generation had a larger, more modern body than earlier Victors. Its styling reflected the design trends of the early 1970s. Inside, there was plenty of space for families. The car could also be equipped with larger engines, giving it respectable performance for its class. One reason people liked the Victor was its practicality. It could be used for commuting, family trips, business journeys, and long drives across Britain. It was not an exotic automobile. That was exactly the point. There were thousands of ordinary British families who could afford cars like this, but ordinary cars often have the shortest lives. They were driven hard, they accumulated mileage, and eventually they were scrapped. That is why the Vauxhall Victor is so rare today. It wasn't necessarily destroyed because it was a bad car. It disappeared because it was an everyday car, and everyday cars rarely receive the preservation that expensive classics receive.
Number 5. The Jaguar XJ6 Series 2. The Jaguar XJ6 was one of Britain's most respected luxury cars during the 1970s. The Series 2 version arrived in 1973 and continued the elegant formula that had made the XJ famous. The design was unmistakably Jaguar. A long bonnet, low roofline, elegant grille, and smooth bodywork. Inside, the car offered leather, wood, carpeting, and a beautifully finished dashboard. The XJ6 could also be equipped with powerful 6-cylinder engines. For many wealthy drivers, it represented the perfect balance between luxury and driving enjoyment. It was not simply a chauffeur's car. The owner could drive it personally and enjoy the experience. The XJ6 became a familiar sight in cities and on Britain's motorways, but maintaining an old Jaguar could be expensive. As these cars aged, mechanical and electrical problems could become costly. Many eventually disappeared from the roads. Today, a well-preserved Series 2 XJ6 is something special. It represents one of the clearest images of 1970s British luxury.
Number 4. The Rover P6. The Rover P6 was one of the most interesting British executive cars of its era. It looked modern compared with some of the larger, more traditional luxury saloons. The design was relatively clean and understated. Inside, there was a comfortable cabin with quality materials and plenty of space. The P6 also had a reputation for sophisticated engineering. Different versions were offered with 4-cylinder engines, while the later V8 version added considerably more performance. That V8 transformed the character of the car. Suddenly, the reserved-looking Rover could move with surprising speed. The P6 appealed to professionals who wanted something more refined than an ordinary family car. It also had a certain sense of individuality. It did not look like everything else parked outside a British office. But by the middle of the 1970s, the design was aging. Newer cars were arriving with more modern interiors and sharper styling. The P6 gradually disappeared. Today, surviving examples are reminders of Rover's ability to combine comfort, engineering, and understated British design.
Number 3. The Triumph Stag. The Triumph Stag was different from almost everything else on this list. It was a stylish British Grand Tourer designed for relaxed driving with a little more excitement. Introduced in 1970, the Stag featured a long bonnet, elegant proportions, and a removable roof. It could be used as a coupe or an open-top car. For summer driving, few British cars looked more attractive. The interior was comfortable and sophisticated. There was room for passengers, luggage, and long journeys. The car's V8 engine gave it a character that separated it from ordinary family cars. But the Stag also developed a reputation for reliability problems. Engine cooling and other mechanical issues could cause trouble for owners. That damaged the car's reputation during its lifetime. And yet, the Stag never completely disappeared from enthusiasts' memories. Today, properly restored examples are highly valued by collectors. The Stag is a perfect example of a British car that had the looks, the comfort, and the personality. It simply needed to be more reliable.
Number 2. The Jaguar XJ12. XJ12. The Jaguar XJ12 represented the ultimate expression of the XJ formula. It combined the elegant shape of the XJ with a massive 5.3-liter V12 engine. 12 cylinders gave the car extraordinary smoothness. The power delivery was effortless. The engine did not need to shout. It simply moved the large Jaguar forward with quiet authority. Inside, the cabin was filled with traditional British luxury: leather, wood, carpeting, comfortable seats, and a feeling of isolation from the outside world. The XJ12 could compete with some of the finest luxury cars in Europe. It also had something many competitors could not easily copy: character. But there was a price. The V12 was complicated. Fuel consumption was heavy. Maintenance could be expensive. As these cars became older, keeping them on the road became increasingly difficult. Many disappeared. Those that survived were often saved by enthusiasts who understood what made them special. Today, a clean XJ12 can still make people stop and look. It remains one of the great examples of British luxury.
Number 1. The Morris Marina. The Morris Marina may seem like an unusual choice for a list about British luxury and executive cars, but that is exactly what makes its disappearance so interesting. Introduced in 1971 by British Leyland, the Marina was designed as an affordable family car for ordinary British motorists. It was not a Rolls-Royce, it was not a Bentley, and it certainly was not a Jaguar. But in 1975, it was everywhere. You could see Marinas outside factories, outside supermarkets, outside pubs, outside railway stations, and parked on residential streets across Britain. The Marina came in several body styles, including saloon, coupe, and estate versions. It was practical, it was affordable, and it was simple enough to appeal to a huge number of drivers. For families, it offered useful space. For businesses, it could serve as practical transport. For ordinary workers, it was simply a car they could afford, and that is why its disappearance is so remarkable. Millions of ordinary miles were put on these cars. They were used for commuting, shopping, holidays, work, and everyday life. But everyday cars rarely receive special treatment when they become old. Rust began to take its toll, repairs became uneconomical, scrappage removed thousands more. Newer cars arrived with better equipment, better corrosion protection, and more modern designs. Slowly, the Marina vanished. A car that had once been almost impossible to avoid became increasingly difficult to find. The Britain of 1975 feels very different today. The roads looked different, the buildings looked different, and the cars certainly looked different. There were Jaguars outside hotels, Rovers outside offices, Triumphs on country roads, Daimlers outside private clubs, and ordinary Morris Marinas filling Britain's streets. Some of these cars were luxurious, some were practical, some were powerful, and some were simply part of everyday life. But they shared one thing. They belonged to a particular moment in British history, a time when domestic manufacturers still played a huge role in the lives of British drivers. Today, many of those manufacturers have disappeared, changed ownership, or moved into very different markets, and the cars that once filled Britain's roads have largely vanished with them. That is why these vehicles are worth remembering, not just because of their engines or styling, but because they tell us what Britain looked like, what people valued, and how people traveled. A Jaguar XJ12 reminds us of British luxury. A Triumph Stag reminds us of open-road adventure. A Rover P5B represents traditional authority, and the Morris Marina reminds us of ordinary, everyday life. Most of these cars were never expected to become famous classics. They were simply built, sold, driven, repaired, and eventually discarded. But decades later, their disappearance is exactly what makes them fascinating. They are pieces of a Britain that slowly disappeared from the roads. And sometimes, the cars we remember most are not the most expensive ones. They are the ones that were once everywhere. Then, almost without anyone noticing, they were gone.